Kazakhstan International Vectors program informs you about international relations, political opinions, economic solutions and social development. Human capital is even more valuable than physical one and should be included in the balance sheet of the organization. Francis Likert, American social psychologist. Hundreds of trillions of dollars for the knowledge and patents. How much does the intellectual capital of the world cost? Why investing in people payoff is higher than investments in the equipment? Which countries make money on buying and selling of licenses? The increase in output and economy today is impossible without the development of the intellectual capital. It is divided into a human, in the form of knowledge and skills of specific individuals, and institutional, in the form of patents, trademarks, and other intangible assets. Some researchers identify one more: consumer capital, formed by the brand and the history of the relationship with customers. In fact, the main profit of the world of the global largest companies is really based on the intellectual component of the product that they sell to their customers. Still, any work is done by people, so there is nothing more important than them. The World Bank in the late 20th century has made an attempt to calculate the total cost of human capital in the world. It was $365 trillion. Of these, $95 trillion belongs to the US, 30 trillions belong to Russia, 25 trillions to China, 9 trillion to Brazil, and 7 trillion to India. On human capital, the so-called economy of knowledge is based, which is able to use effectively any innovations useful for the society, be it patents, licenses, or any other know-how. In the frameworks of such system, it is possible to implement innovative ideas on practice. This economy creates and multiplies the human capital. The specialists note that any person with no exceptions can become the part of the economy of knowledge. Why to do? Well, to learn a lot and learn constantly. Learn the new knowledge that appears in the world. And after it is learned, after we have studied anything, our own knowledge begins to generate on the basis of the knowledge that we got somewhere in there, well, maybe in high schools. Funds in the human capital are being actively invested by the state in the form of spending on health, education and social welfare. Even in the last century, the developed countries have realized that these costs are not a burden, but a long-term investment in their own people, which will further lead to the rise of economy. An example is the United States, which in the 90s have been spending on the human resources 3 times more money than on the industry. The Asian countries such as Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore are also investing big money in their people. Here the majority of population receives qualitative higher education. The result of this practice of investment in the intellectual capital, the rapid growth of the economies of these states, which even gained the name the economic miracle. In addition, the responsibility for the development and formation of human capital lies not only on the state, but also on private companies and corporations. There is the system of training and staff development for some companies. It encourages people on a daily basis, or let's say on a weekly basis, or all the time to look for something new, to surf the internet, to get involved in seminars or something new that has appeared, the new form of teaching. The system is a kind of mentoring. Experts believe that even small businesses are able to stimulate their employees to develop. Conferences, workshops and seminars are the way to build human capital, increase profits and the overall growth of the company. This theory was proved by American scientists back in the mid-20th century. Schultz, Becker and Mincer have calculated that the economic returns to education costs overcome many times the return on investment in machinery and equipment. One of the systems of the capacity increase of human capital is being actively practiced in Japan. Their workers are being hired for life and regularly invest in their knowledge. The system alike is introduced also in some American corporations, for example IBM. However, for Japan this is particularly important because professional education and training costs there are 3 times higher than in the US. Not less money the global companies invest in the organizational capital. The feature of intangible assets, as you know, is that they are not amortized. Their value can only go up, because there are added and initial costs of setting up the object and all the costs of advertising, promotion on the market and so on. The longer and more actively the object is used on the market, the higher is the cost. Scientists at the University of Westminster in the UK amounted to forecast what will be the world in the next 100 years and argue that human fantasy and science will go far forward, so the modern way of life of our descendants will seem fantastic. The first thing they predict, the growth of negative skyscrapers that will go under the ground for at least 25 floors. Thanks to the technology to overcome high blood pressure, the underwater residential spaces will also appear. The researchers also suggest ubiquity of 3D printers, by means of which it will be easy to make furniture, houses and vehicles. It will be even possible to download the food via the internet and to materialize that dish with the help of home printing devices. What organizations are involved in the protection of intellectual property on a global scale, and what are the benefits of membership in economic unions? For 15 years already, on April 26th, the International Day of Intellectual Property is being celebrated. This holiday was established by the United Nations in order to draw attention to this problem in the world and to show how its defense system affects progress. This year the celebration was dedicated to the performance in a digital environment. There is even the World Intellectual Property Organization in the world, which deals not only with the development of this sector, but is also engaged in the protection of literary and artistic works. WIPO also administers the Convention on the Protection of Industrial Property. This concept includes patents, trademarks, industrial designs, and other objects of intellectual capital. They must be recorded by the state, and anyone who wants to make money have to buy a license to certain inventions and activities. There are lots of countries, including the same Japan, which were rising on the purchase of licenses and the organization of production at home. Previously, an example was cited about the patents on the use of nylon. It was bought by Japan almost at the end of '40s for $10 million. They earned billions on it literally until they owned the whole complex of property rights to these objects. It all depends on how it appears in the stream of economic requirements and whether it can be afforded by this or that state. The intellectual capital of any company can be assessed from a financial point of view. It is especially easy to see this on the example of purchase of one company by another. For example, one large corporation bought a small company engaged in the production of packaging for $12.9 billion. The cost of buildings, structures and inventories held by the company amounted to $1.3 billion. $11.6 billion were in the brand, communications, reputation, marketing capabilities and knowledge of 51,000 employees. This means the intellectual capital accounted for 90% in the price of the company. International non-profit organizations are also involved in the security and intellectual property protection worldwide. The most famous of them is the International Association for the Protection of Intellectual Property, or AIPPI, which works already for more than 120 years. The organization is headquartered in Switzerland and has more than 8,000 lawyers, patent attorneys, scientists and practitioners from more than 100 countries. countries. The organization acts through the national groups in different countries. Resolutions of the association are being published in 4 languages: English, French, German and Spanish, and further sent to WIPO, WTO and national patent and trademark offices worldwide. In addition, the organization not only ensures the compliance with the recommendations by the laws, but is trying to unify the norms and standards around the world. Objects of copyright do not require registration in any country of the world. They are being protected equally. When someone but the creator receives the income from the object of copyright or its part, it is regarded as theft. The copyright infringement is in fact always determined by the author. It is solely a legal case considered in court. There are cases when the object is not completely used, but only a part of it. Some literary works, part of a musical work, part of the architectural work, it's all the court is considering, because copyright law protects not only the whole property as a whole, but each part of it which can be used independently. After Kazakhstan's accession to the WTO, the rights of intellectual property are particularly important. In order to develop, the country must successfully apply advanced technologies to create and promote their own high-technology products. To this end, intellectual property should be protected on a global level. In Japan, 1 million people in the country accounts for 1,000 inventions a year. In the United States, 500 inventions per 1 million people. In Kazakhstan, about 100 patents per 1 million. The same indicators are in Russia and the Ukraine. Creation of economic communities dictates new rules on the market of intellectual capital. For example, in the European Union, it is eligible to get a patent not for one single country, but for the whole European market, a trademark which is protected in all countries of Europe. Now the work upon the creation of such a system is being carried out in the framework of the EAEU. Today, the Eurasian Economic Commission fights against unfair competition and advises entrepreneurs on the use of trademarks. When going to the supermarket to buy milk, one can see the decoration of Kazakhstan, Kazakh mountains, yurt, inscriptions, etc. Such fragments that characterize the state are being applied to the commodity packaging. We conducted a number of studies, a number of surveys, and up to 80% of consumers say that the Kazakhstan's milk in fact is made in the Republic of Belarus. Now we're consulting with our colleagues in terms of understanding this issue and that they have to change the design. Such technologies in many countries around the world are perceived as a consumer fraud and are punishable by law. The EAEU is conducting explanatory work on the subject, but copying of trademarks is a factor indicating the development of competition. The Eurasian Economic Union now operates in a single product market and a common labor market. With the entry into force of the treaty, since last year we have recognized education documents. That is, if a citizen of Kazakhstan wants to go to Russia, to Belarus, Kyrgyzstan or Armenia to work there, he or she must not be required to show a document about the education. No one can require certification confirming this. The only thing they can claim is notarized translation into the language of the state. Any employer treats a citizen of any state of EAEU as a graduate. In fact, this and some other innovations create a single intellectual capital of the Eurasian Economic Union. Besides, thanks to the work of the Eurasian Economic Union, the citizens of the EAEU have an opportunity to acquire knowledge and gain experience in any country of the 5, as the migration legislation is simplified. Let's say you've come to Moscow and settled as an engineer. You've signed a 2-year contract, but due to the fact that there were no agreements that now exist in the framework of the Union, you should leave in 180 days, stay a day or 2 outside the boundary and then come back. Now this has gone. If you have a 2-year contract, then you can work for 2 years on this particular company in Moscow. Naturally, the same is everywhere. The ministers of the Eurasian Economic Commission took part in the Astana Economic Forum in 2016. One of the topics of that forum was to ensure a long-term growth through the development of intellectual capital and knowledge-based economy. It was announced that today the main function of economy is not the production of goods, but the knowledge production. And the developed countries today are those who create more new knowledge.